Welcome to the second episode of Hear Me Out. Today's guest is Albert Marshall, the founder of Heite Canada. I'm so excited to dive into this conversation with him, so let's get to it. Hi, Albert. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Very well, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right, so how did you get involved in the hearing loss world?
So I have done a number of things in my life. I'm actually a lawyer. I've been involved in, I practiced law for 10 years and got into other businesses, manufacturing, worked across Canada, the US, Europe, and a little bit in Asia. Um, I then came when I was back in Canada after some of that. I had a fellow come to me who was a friend of mine, an older friend. He was in his 90s and he needed hearing aids. And he actually said to me, could I assist him? And he had a number of quotes on hearing aids. And quite frankly, when I saw the quotes, I was shocked at the cost. What was funny is this gentleman, he actually taught me how to fly. He was a flight instructor, and
Oh,
he,
cool.
of course, retired by that stage. But he and I were good friends, and I always thought he didn't have a nickel because he was so cheap. And when he did pass away, it was quite funny because he was quite well to do, but he hit it well. But anyway, so I investigated this for him. And during some of the work that I had done in China, I had run into a fellow that worked with GN Resound and he had been their plant manager for a number of years. And I literally ran into him by mistake. We were coming out of a building and we bumped shoulders, and he spoke English very well. So we had a nice chat, and I still had his business card. And so I actually called him at that stage and I asked him a little. By then, he had started his own manufacturing for hearing aids. Ultimately, I could see that there was an enormous difference between the cost and the sell price.
Right.
And having come from manufacturing where margins are typically, with manufacturing food packaging, the margins are razor thin. And so, I said I should look into this industry. I helped that fellow get a better cost. Anyway, I got into it really. I opened a clinic in Burlington, Ontario, and but I've learned a lot. I must say that in those days I didn't know anything. Of course, I thought I did, but we opened that first clinic. I actually worked the front desk. Had uh, a person, a professional in the back, and I worked the front desk for the first year. It was quite an education, really, on what the needs were, what patients needed, and anyway, the first year went very, very well. We like I have this philosophy in life that it's funny. When I was 20, I wanted to be rich and famous, and quite frankly, I had fairly foolish ideas. And now, if I hold the door open for somebody and they give me the right smile, it makes my whole day. So, like I believe, and this isn't a business philosophy. This is a life. I'm not sure there's a difference between business and life. I think you have a way of living and that comes out in everything. And so the goal is to create value for people. And law was actually very much like that. People, even though people like to make jokes and so on, and lawyers sometimes have to do some very tough things, but at the end of the day, someone comes to you with a problem and you have to help them. And if you don't help them, there's no way that there's any value created. And some lawyers, look at, and I'm sure it's the same with some hearing professionals, very few, I hope, who look at people as an opportunity and, to squeeze them. And that's not the way we do it. What we're trying to do, quite frankly, is to create value and to give them a very fair cost. And we don't want to squeeze the last $500 out of someone's pocket. What we want to do is provide them with the best possible hearing aid we can and the best quality of care at a very fair price, and hopefully have them be our patient for the rest of their lives.
That's amazing. I always am fascinated to hear other people's stories about their connection with the hearing loss world, whether it be themselves who has hearing loss or someone they know. So thank you for sharing that. You touched on this a little bit, but what is the history of Heite? When did you open that first door?
So it was about 15 years ago that we opened that. And there's one other thing that we do that is quite different than most in the industry. And I had learned this in the manufacturing. So I had a manufacturing plant in Brantford, Ontario, and I had a 30% interest in it. And I encouraged the plant manager and the sales manager also to take an ownership interest in it. And the person who had the big ownership interest was not in the building, and sort of the money guy. Anyway, what amazed me is how it brought the team together, and we solved a couple of problems, and it was just going like gangbusters. And so we opened a plant in the States, we opened a plant in Europe, and literally we had so much demand that we couldn't service it, and it was just printing money, to be honest with you. But ultimately, the majority owner changed the arrangement. Quite frankly, didn't follow our deal, and so the whole thing fell apart. But the lesson that I took from that, and I've applied in the hearing industry, is that the professional, so the HIS or the audiologist in the clinic, we offer them the opportunity to be an owner with us. And when you first think about that, you think, oh my God, that's, to be frank, when I first proposed that, my wife heard me talking about it, and she was upset with me, and she said, you're going to give away the very thing that feeds our children. And but I explained to her that the way it works is, and I thought it would work, was that because if you have a hearing clinic, you can imagine that if you can improve sales, all of your rent, all of your labor, everything is already covered in those original sales, assuming you're a break even or more. And so on the next sale, you only have to cover the hearing aid. And so by being generous with the professional and allowing them to share in the benefits of the clinic, you get a whole bunch of benefits. One of them is that between your efforts and theirs, sales go higher. And so the profitability that you get on those extra sales allow them to make much more money than they would just on salary, because they get salary as well, salary, benefits plus profit. But also it means that we can give that and be generous and still be as good or better off ourselves. And it's unbelievable the focus. Like if you have and you'll have to cut me off because I'm the real talker, so don't be shy if you want to direct this discussion. But if you set a large chain across the street from us and we're over here, one of the things I've learned is that brains are extremely well spread around. There's smart people everywhere. So on average, their team will be as smart as ours, okay? So there isn't an advantage that way. But if you've got an owner in the building, that's just like magic. And so on average, and more than average, we will have a better clinic. We'll have a clinic that will provide better care and service simply because of the motivation. And I give this silly example. If you've ever driven a rental car, you know that when you're going down the road, if you see a bump in the road, a hole in the road, you'll try to avoid it if you were raised properly to respect assets, people's work, and so on. But if you're in your own car, you will absolutely avoid it, right? And so you'll try with a rental car, but you will do it with your own car. And that's a silly example, but that's fundamentally the difference in the focus and the quality of care that owners bring in the building.
I think that's a great example. And I think it's really important for people like myself who wear hearing aids and look for a clinic to know this backstory, because when you think, oh, my hearing aid costs so much, but there's so much more to the story about your care involved as well. So I think that's really important that you shared that. So thank you for that. So you have over 60 locations across North America, which is amazing. Do you have any plan in the works to expand past North America or deeper into North America?
So we do have one in the States, right? And the rest are in Canada. We're actually fairly close to 70 locations. People often ask what's the magic number? Is there a magic number? To me, and it comes back to that original discussion, one of the things that I've found in life that is most rewarding is helping other people. And so, obviously we're helping patients, like I should say this because I'm just amazed. I cannot believe how lucky I am to wake up in this industry. So I'm in an industry where I can make a living. I can do it without cheating or stealing from anybody. And, for someone who's worked in a number of industries, there are industries where that happens, If someone is listening to this and says, oh, that's not realistic, well, they're very lucky that they've worked in that kind of field. But, when I was in manufacturing, it took everything I had not to cheat and steal because the pressure from customers was so brutal. So I'm in this industry. I can make a living. I don't have to cheat and steal. I get to go home at night and know that we've made a little difference to patients' lives. and I get to help the professionals and the people that work with us sort of, get to the highest level, that they can. And so I feel absolutely blessed that way. But as far as the numbers, locations, I mean, our goal is not really, I want 100 locations or 200 locations. It's more what we want to do is put together as many wonderful and capable teams as we can. We have looked at a couple of other markets in Europe, but our primary focus right now is Canada, simply because even though we're approaching 70, there are still many markets that are underserved. So
Well, that's incredible. And like, thank you for doing that. I mean, hearing health is so important. And so putting focus wherever you can is just extremely amazing. So I appreciate that as someone with hearing loss. Um, so one of the things Hear Right offers is a 90-day trial period for hearing aids. And I'm just curious how you came to that decision and why it's so important for you to offer.
you do see a variety of time frames, and what we want, again, it comes back to that value creation. We're not interested in having it hit the 31st day and you say to someone, well, too bad. I mean, we really want them to decide that these things add value to their lives before they're fully committed. Now, I think, we have this argument, we've had this argument inside because, some people think it's too long. I don't. I think if you're proud of the work that you do and the products that you provide, and we deliberately try to provide top quality products at a lower price than we see in the other clinics around us. If you're proud of that, the thing will work. We'll make, one of the things in the early days when we first opened that clinic in Burlington, it did create some stirs because our pricing was quite a bit lower. And during some of the initial annual meetings, some of the other professionals were not happy with me. But it's interesting because I really think that, it may take all month. You got to work all month rather than just 5 days a month, but we can still make a good living at those prices. And quite frankly, over the years, we've had to raise our prices twice because the gap was simply too large. People thought there must be something wrong. And so we twice over the 15 years, we've stepped up and to try to, strangely enough, it had to charge more to convince people that the products were the same. And to be fair, the market has come down. So this enormous gap is still there, but it's less, so.
Right. Well, and I think that too, as years go on, inflation, all those things also play a huge factor, as much as we don't want to admit that. I mean, at the end of the day, as a business owner, you do need to make money to be able to stay open to help more people. So it is a cycle that, has
If
to
I can
happen,
comment on that
unfortunately.
for a second, we
Yeah.
often, yeah, we meet young professionals, young audiologists, young HISs who come out of school and somehow think that selling or making a profit is wrong or dirty. And I know when I first left the law and I first went into business, I had that same feeling. I somehow thought that I was above that. But at the end of the day, we have people out there in the market who desperately need this service. They need to be able to hear their grandchildren, their children. They need it so they can carry on their businesses and their lives. And so we're not forcing them to take them, but we are doing our best to get them to try to so that they realize they need it and then to do it at a fair price. So I think, quite frankly, you don't keep the lights on, without making a profit. And nobody denies that. No one should be upset about that. At the end of the day, if you're adding value in excess of what you're charging for it and fairly, it's wonderful.
That is a good point. Very good point. So you've been in this industry for 15 years, over 15 years. And how do you feel that the industry is changing in terms of technology and what's coming with hearing technology?
It's amazing, really, with the changes. So when I first started, they were still hearing aids with a screwdriver, and digital was starting, but there were certainly many hearing aids that were adjusted with a screwdriver. And no, the biggest change that I've noticed is that the number of people that we can help is higher because of technology. And so in those early days, it seemed many times we were not able to provide something that was, was effective, and simple things like noise canceling and word discrim and so on. And so someone with low word discrim, there's more hope now than there ever was. So no, it's amazing. And just the connectivity so that people can be social, because we are social animals, it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Wow, that's amazing. Have you noticed any shifts specifically in demographics when it comes to hearing loss that you see coming through your clinics?
Well, it does seem that people are coming in sooner. Now, it may be that I'm just getting older and people seem younger. But no, it does seem that people are more accepting, although, you do see, and even my mother, I'll put my mother on the thing here because it's not secret. She's in her 80s, and she was a little reticent about having a hearing aid. But no, I do think there's a big shift towards acceptance just because there's so much tech out there. And I think that's good because, I mean, I am not an audiologist or an HIS, but um, I have seen what happens when someone doesn't get a hearing aid when they need it. I very early on in that Burlington store when I was working the front desk, a gentleman came in. He had very similar hearing loss left and right, but he didn't want to spend any money. And I think it actually wasn't money. I think it was the visual. So he got one, and I begged him to get two because of what I had been told by the professional there. Anyway, about 7 years later, I ran into him again because I, of course, wasn't working every day in the clinic. And he came to me and he said, I waited about 5 or 6 years and I finally got the second one. And he said, my God, you were right. He said, my ability to understand is much better. But he said the one that was left without a hearing aid for those 5 years isn't able to recognize speech to the same level as the one that I fit earlier. And I'll never forget that. And he just sort of shook my hand and said, I should have listened to you then, but I'm doing it now. And anyway, there you go.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people don't realize is if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's why when I was first diagnosed, I got my hearing aid right away because my audiologist at the time did kind of explain that. And I was like, oh, I don't want to get it to get worse than it already is. So I do think there's a whole educational piece around there too, to kind of push through that stubbornness of those people who don't want to wear a hearing aid. But I mean, you can't even really see mine at all. So I think people need to realize that hearing aids don't look like they used to either.
No, and it's far better to be fully engaged, than to worry about it. It's funny because I think at the end of the day, the person that notices it is you. It's not the people in the room. The people are there because they want to see you. They're not worried. It's like a simple, anyway, what I mean. People are so self-conscious, and we're all that way a little bit, but I do have to remind myself that, you shouldn't worry so much, so.
Yeah, that is a huge thing in all things of life, really.
Yes. Yeah.
So where can people learn more about Hear Right and all of your services?
So of course our website, do you want me to give it? So it's here.
I can link it below
Yeah,
for people as well.
yeah. And of course we're on social media as well. I mean, at the end of the day, whether they come to Hear Right or to someone else, the main message should be to get it addressed because you want to remain sharp, you want to be involved, you want the best out of life that you can get. And of course, we'd love to have them come see us. And I think that we provide excellent care and very competitive prices. But, there are many capable professionals in many of the clinics out there. Not, we don't have, as I said before, that there are smart and capable people in so many places, so.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Albert. I'm so glad that we got to hear more about your story and more about Hear Right because I think people need to see this side of the industry as well. So I appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate your time. You have a great day.
You too.